Hello, I'm Benchwarmer, and today I'm a little bored. I don't have work or school, so I'm going to take you through a tour of my studio and show you kind of how I make my songs. So here's a little tour of my setup. I have my laptop, I use Logic, I have a Scarlett 2i2 interface that I bought off of some dude on Facebook Marketplace like 3 years ago. My studio speakers aren't much. They were real cheap. Honestly, don't even know the brand, but they have been loyal to me, along with my cheap little headphones and shrimp. For microphones, I mainly use the Shure SM58. I also have an SM7B that I use for a lot of acoustic stuff, and occasionally for backing vocals I use this. It's just a cheaper dynamic microphone. I have this little 2 preamp I honestly don't even use anymore. And then let's go to the guitars. Over here I have my Mexican-made Telecaster. This is my main guitar. I use it for all my shows live, and I'd say about 90% of the guitars on this album were recorded with this. Over here I use this Epiphone Sheridan 2 Pro, I believe it is, for a couple of the lead tracks on the album, along with the rhythm track on Honey. Over here I have a little Squire Telecaster I borrowed from my roommate. A lot of times when I record guitar, I put a little sock over the strings just to keep me from hitting extra strings I don't want to hit. Over here we have the first guitar I ever bought with my own money. This is a Mexican-made Stratocaster. I haven't changed the strings in years, so they are real dead, and for a lot of songs, that's the tone I'm looking for. Over here is my lovely bass. It's a Mexican-made jazz bass. I absolutely adore this thing. You can get a wide variety of tones from it. Every bass line I've ever put in a song was recorded on this thing. For acoustic stuff, I have my lovely little Taylor GS Mini. This has been one of my favorite guitars I own. I write most of the songs on this thing. If I ever do acoustic shows, I usually play this. Over here is Old Reliable. I bought this at a pawn shop for like $20 4 years ago when I first started playing guitar. It's been there ever since. So now I'm going to take you through one of my projects just so you can see kind of how I go about production. I am by no means a professional producer, but my main philosophy is just kind of fuck around until something sounds good, and that's exactly what I did. So this is probably one of my favorite songs on the album. It's called When the World's on Fire. I'm releasing it on April 22nd. Quick little plug there. So I'm going to take you through kind of what I did on this song. It opens up with this little intro bit. This is just a little track I found in Apple Loops. Some space stuff. I like space. The song is kind of, about when the world's on fire, so why not go to space? It's a good little intro. It counts down, and it goes right into the guitar part. For the guitars, I use the Telecaster on this song, and I ran them straight into this Britain Clean. I left a lot of the main stock settings alone. A lot of the main things I did where I have an EQ, I kind of brought out the mids and a little bit of the high end just to give it more presence. Usually on guitars, I use a compressor with this stock setting, guitar electric, and then I kind of mess around and edit it to make it sound better, pretty much. I don't know how to describe compressors or what I'm doing, but like I said, just kind of fuck around until something sounds good. I always throw a chorus on here. I believe for this song, I recorded it with the chorus pedal I have on there, and then I kind of added this for a more broad chorus effect. And then I also used a multipressor. Don't ask me how I figured out these settings. I honestly could not tell you, but I guess it sounded good. So then in the end, we have a guitar part that kind of sounds like this. So what I did to give that a little more presence was I did new track with duplicate settings, And then the way I record is I do a bunch of takes, and then I kind of pick the best takes from each part and smash them together. So in my double, I used a completely different take that I didn't use in the main track. I turned down the volume a bit, panned it a little to the right. I think I always do 30 to 35. So then you have this cool layered double, gives it a little more presence. It's more noticeable with like headphones or car speakers, but if you're just listening to it through a phone, you can't notice it. So another main part in this track that kind of adds a little bit of presence and just makes it more whole is this little synth part. I do not remember how I made this synth part. I think it was an Apple loop that I kind of edited and then transposed to the key of the song, but it has this nice little it's a good little background thing, and you'll notice here that I panned one to the left, one to the right, and then for the one on the right, I kind of delayed the time to give it a delay. On those, I did this kind of EQ, just kind of highlighting the mids, taking out a lot of the lows and the highs. I threw another chorus on there. I used the pad enhancer, but turned it down a little bit, and then a modulation delay. So I copied that. So both of these have the exact same settings. And then later when we get into the verse, I have this exact same synth part, but I lowered it by 12 cents. So it's kind of a nice little background to the song. Okay. So all together in the intro, we have this synth part, this little vocal part, and then the lead guitar. And all that kind of starts off real simple until the drums come in. So for the drums, I use MIDI drums because I don't have a drum kit in my room. I don't think it's big enough for that. And also, recording drums is hard. I don't have that many mics. So I use MIDI drums. I a lot of times use the drummer that Logic has to map out the song, and then I transpose it to MIDI and adjust it how I want to get good fills and all that. For this particular song, and also on songs like Doubt, I used producer kits and 60 Soul. I don't believe I messed around with this one too much. Sometimes I like to go in here and change around the different parts of the kit, but I didn't do that here. There's not too much going on the drums. I threw a little compressor on it with a tiny bit of gain. I EQ some of the parts, and I think the only other little production trick I do on here is I take the room mic, I double it, and then pan them off to the side, just to give it a wider sound. Okay, so we have the drums, the rhythm guitar, and now it's time to throw on the bass. The bass line for this song is honestly a mess. I love the bass line, but the way I did it was real messy. I took the original recording from when I first wrote the song, and I just kind of stole that for the verses and then recorded an entirely new part for the choruses. So I have a bass line that was recorded like 6 months apart. But this is the bass line. For this, I used the substation, but I turned off the sub bass. I brought out a lot of the bass. I believe I used the vintage bass compressor. And for my EQ, I took out a lot of the high end, because as you can hear when I originally recorded it, there's a lot of clicking. So I wanted to take that out. But this bass line pairs real nice with the rhythm part. And then you throw the drums on top of that. And then that's synth part. So altogether probably one of my favorite grooves on the album. So then all we need to do to make it whole is throw in this lead part. I love this lead line. It's one of my favorite lead guitar lines I've written because it's real simple, but it kind of ties that whole rhythm together. It's just... So for this, I used the stock option of surfing in stereo. But for that main stock plugin always starts off real aggressive. So I turned down the reverb a bit, threw in a little bit of echo. And then for this, I did a lot of the same things. I got an email. Ooh. I did a lot of the same things I did for the rhythm guitar. I have the amp here. I believe I just kind of moved this over a little bit. We have my EQ. I used the cleanup guitar stock option, but then I kind of edited it, bringing back some more of this low mid. Taking away a little bit of this and bringing in some highs, but not too much. For compressor, I use the guitar electric option. I told you that's my go-to option. I also used a stereo spreader to kind of spread out the highs, because for panning, I didn't do too much here. Yeah, I just panned it 5 over to the right, because I wanted it to be kind of front and center. I also used a limiter, because I noticed when I was mixing, there were a lot of harsh tones coming out. I don't know how the limiter helped that. I also have both guitars going to this reverb bus. And over here, I have another bit of the lead guitar part. This is for kind of a mid portion of the song where everything kind of drops out. I just copied this, but I added a lot more reverb, because for this part, I used a slide. Okay, so then that means in this intro part, we have this nice little groove to open the song. It's definitely one of my favorite openings in any song I've written. So here's our main vocal track for this. I started off with the DS here because I have a lot of sibilance in my voice, especially when I'm recording it through that. I threw everything through an amp. I used a transparent preamp, the British 212, and I took a lot of the presence out of this. And then I threw everything through 2 compressors. I usually start off with a VCA, one form of it, whichever sounds best. And then I use the vintage vocal here. I turned all the distortion off just to kind of keep it clean. Honestly, for compressors, I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of pick different options and mess around with them until it sounds good. And then we have the EQ. For EQ, I took a lot of the lows out to about 350, had it tapered off, so you still have some lows there. I take a lot of the mids out too, and I also like to take this range out, around the 4K range, because that's where a lot of the sibilance shines through. And I mean, that's pretty much it for EQ. I also use this Pro MB. I don't pay for it anymore. I use the free trial, and for some reason it still works. Then I have a second EQ where I kind of take out a lot of the frequency ranges. You know, I did the frequency sweep, found the nasty ranges, and took those out. Also, sometimes I like to just bring the entire thing down, just to kind of keep it nice and warm. Threw everything through a tape delay. I have it at 1/4, all dry, not a lot of wet, so I honestly don't think there is much of that there, and a tiny amount of reverb. So then we have a vocal track that kind of sounds like this. I hate listening to vocals just by themselves. And one thing I've started doing to kind of add more presence to the vocals is I started doubling them and layering them. So for these, I just use a different take that I didn't use in the main track. Both of these are 2 separate takes. And then the main thing I do on these is I EQ them to where it's just a lot of the mid shining through. and I throw a super wet tape delay on. I usually use the quarter, 1/4, whatever you want to call it. I usually use that one just so it repeats. And then sometimes I throw a vocal transformer on it just to separate it more from the vocals. I EQ these the way I do just to kind of bring some of the tones out that I felt like were missing from the main vocal. So then you have this.
I swear we won't go too far.
And in the chorus, I kind of did the same thing. I have another double. So overall I have 4 doubles, and then I have a secondary main that's kind of real hidden in the mix. And that just kind of brings more life to it. So then overall, we have a vocal track that sits in the mix real nicely. So there's honestly not too much else going on in this song. I think the only other thing is this part after the first chorus, where everything kind of drops out, and then you have this tiny little... It's real hidden in the mix. And that's pretty much it for this song. So that is When the World's on Fire. That is kind of what I did mixing wise. In terms of mastering, I didn't do much. I threw a compressor on it. I EQ'd a lot of the tones that I didn't like. You know, I just kind of EQ'd it to sound better. And then I threw a limiter on the entire thing to bring it to the level for streaming services. And that is pretty much it. So if you enjoyed this little video, I may do them for other songs. This was a fairly laid back song. I didn't do a lot on it in terms of production, and production is one of those things, like, the more I work on this album, the more I learn and the cooler stuff I do. So if you enjoy it, maybe I'll do it for other ones. Thank you for watching.